You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Welcome to Volatility Views, the premier program for volatility traders. Each week, we'll take a deep dive into the world of volatility with in-depth analysis, trading activity reviews, strategy breakdowns, cutting-edge education, and much more. We'll also bring you exclusive conversations with the traders, researchers, and asset managers who are reshaping the volatility landscape. If it involves volatility, then you'll find it on Volatility Views. Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you SPKEX volatility products. SPKEX options and futures are traded on the SPKEX Volatility Index, SPKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about SPKEX at miaxoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. And now, it's time to take a deep dive into the world of volatility. It's time for Volatility Views.
All right, everyone, that music, yes, it has been pretty much the same. That music for the 500th time signals the commencement of the volatility festivities here on Volatility Views. Yes, listeners, this is the 500th episode of Volatility Views. You know, it's been a crazy year for the network. We mentioned new records every month, people coming in more every month. We love to see all of you. We've also been hitting a lot of milestones lately. They've been coming fast and furious. Just did Options Boot Camp a couple of weeks ago, episode 200. And now, of course, trumping that with episode 500. Not many shows make it to 50 or 100, let alone 500 episodes, listeners. So this is going to be a fun one, a fun, very special episode of Blossom and indeed of Volatility Views. So settle in. Hopefully you can join us live. We did open it up free and sundry to all out there. Of course, it'll be available on demand for all you folks as well. And, we thought long and hard about who should join us on the 500th episode of Volatility Views. We'll be joined in a little bit by the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian, one of the people who, aside from myself, I've been on all of them, but aside from me, has been on the most episodes of Volatility Views. And then also joining us today, one of our other frequent offenders, frequent cohorts, the rockingest of lobsters, Mr. Andrew Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com. Mr. G, welcome to Vol Views 500. Doesn't seem like it's been that long, does it, sir? In other ways, it seems like it's been 50 years.
Well, oh my gosh, I just realized that's what, 10 years? No.
It is. I will tell you the dates in a minute. It is more than 10 years.
Holy crap. Oh my gosh. Every time I think of it, I've been working with Sebast for 10 years. So, it's just the days roll by. I guess that's all you can say. They just roll right on by.
they roll on into a beautiful mass that is Vol Views 500. And then also joining us, we thought, we can't just have any guest for this show. It has to be someone meaningful to the show, someone who was part of the long and storied history of this program. And so there was another, for a period there, for several years on the show, we did have another frequent co-host on the program. In fact, he still to this day is the only person who has his own named segment on the show. He is the once and future and now present Dr. VIX, a.k.a. Mr. Russell Rhoads. Mr. Rhoads, welcome back to the program for episode 500, sir. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, and I'm king of obscure statistics. If Vol Views were a TV program, it would be the 5th longest running TV program in history. The Simpsons is number 1, Gunsmoke Lassie, and then Law and Order Special Victims Unit is 516 episodes. I think we'll catch that one in the next 6 months or so. And Law and Order itself is 466. So I know you don't have the Law and Order. Dunk, dunk.
We have surpassed Law and Order. Wow, that is an accomplishment.
Law and Order.
Go us.
I didn't think anything could surpass the endless tree of legal justice that it's Law and Order. Look at you coming hard with the facts. We'll have to put in that. That music there. I think that tinny voice also means we are joined fashionably late. It wouldn't be an appropriate visit from the greasiest of meatballs, Mr. Mark Sebastian from OptionPit.com. If he wasn't fashionably late. Mr. Meatball, welcome to Volatility Views 500. You've been on 400 odd episodes of those. What do you think?
Yeah, I've been on a lot of them. It's good to be here. And I'm really happy to be hanging out with you guys.
Mr. Rhoads came equipped with some fun data. It's only appropriate that I do the same. It is episode 500 after all, listeners. So this show, this program, this little engine that could, debuted all the way back, not even 10 years ago, Mr. Rock Lobster. But in August, it was our 11-year anniversary. That even took me by surprise. I thought it was 10 and a half. It was August 16th of 2011 when the first episodes rolled out for Volatility Views, the sneak preview. It was myself and none other than the infamous Mr. Don Schlesinger. So that was a fun one out there. Episode 2, we dove right into it. It was Don and I can't believe it was episode 2. It was the infamous croquet court episode. Don and I recorded from FIA Boca by the croquet courts. Already by episode 2, we were doing on location episodes there. And then the ball got rolling. By the way, who wants to guess where, and no cheating, who wants to guess where, let's say, VIX was when the show debuted? Anyone have a guess?
I read the notes, so I'm not going to say.
You can't. I know Mr. Meatball didn't read the notes. And Mr. Rocklobster probably not. You guys have a guess? I'll give you a hint. It's higher than you might have thought. It was August of 2011, after all. These were crazy times.
Yeah. That would be in at least the 30s.
Yeah, I'll say, what was the date? It was
August 16th of 2011.
I'll say 32.
42.
That's a pretty good guess. 36. So kind of splitting the uprights there. There's a lot going on that time. So yeah, Vol 36. That was an auspicious way to launch the program. SPKX was around 1,200. So if you want to shed a single tear, there you go. 1,200 in the SPKX. We are floating around 4,000 right now. Obviously, SPY, 112. The skew index, for those who follow such things, yes, it was around back then. 124. So actually looking surprisingly light. Then again, we've talked before about how ridiculous the skew index is. So read into that what you will. VVIX was pretty frothy. It was at a 110, but then again, VIX was at a 36. So you expect a little bit of froth out there in VVIX. Mr. Meatball, you joined us for the first time on episode 2, entitled The Shadowy World of Volatility Swaps. Do you recall joining us to talk vol swaps, sir, all the way back in 2011?
I remember that I don't remember that specific conversation, but I knew that it was a big, heavy deal at the time because this was a lot of people's first time trading through volatility, with the VIX really being, what it is today, if you will, being a huge thing, having a huge pit. So it was exciting.
By the way, we will have more special guests joining us from throughout the show in a few minutes here. The green room is loaded. It is packed to the gills, listeners. But first, let's go out some other data, some other fun nuggets here for the show. We used to have more different segments. We had a segment called the strategy session back in the day, where we used to break down some basic options or really volatility concepts, things like contango and backwardation, all the fun things, dynamic versus static hedging. We would do all of that in the strategy session. We used to also have a segment called the Volatility Viewpoint. That was our dedicated interview segment on the show. A lot of that has kind of just been worked into the show proper, into the Volatility Review now. The segments that we have now, Crystal Ball and Vol Review, they've been staples from the beginning. So from episode 1, we were pretty much guessing the future for Vol and also breaking down the week that was from a Vol perspective out there. In terms of other nuggets, this show, I would put this up against anything out there in terms of guests. It's had quite the epic stable of guests, in addition to everyone who's joining me on here and everyone who's going to join us in a few minutes from the green room. We've also had, we had in episode 6, we had a Nobel Prize winner, Robert Engel. Of course, he won the Nobel Prize for Economics in 2003. Dr. Richard Sandor, he created the Climate Exchange. He's created Ameribor now to rival LIBOR. He's one of the many, quote-unquote, fathers of futures. A lot of people fight for that title. He's one of them out there. We also had Ewan Sinclair, written a bunch of books on vol. Scott Nations, he's been on many times. Chris Cole from Artemis Capital, you might know him from talking about all the big vol blow-ups. He loves a good VIX hedge. We've had Tom Sosnoff. He was on here right before he launched Tasty Trade. He made an infamous comment on this program about how futures were irrelevant for retail. And now here he does. All these years later, he has the small exchange launching small futures contracts. So interesting how the worm turns all these years later. Mr. Rhodes, your first appearance came on October 25th of 2013. This was the shutdown I was thinking of. This was the height of the government shutdown, sir. Do you recall anything about that first appearance? You were still with the Options Institute at the time, sir.
I was dressed as the Joker because it was the Friday before Halloween.
Well, there we go.
That's what I remember.
Unfortunately, it didn't really work on an audio podcast. We missed all of that.
It did. I didn't realize there was no video.
That was our way of kind of sliding. Back then, it would have been even harder to do video than it is today. Mr. Rock Lobster, do you recall your first appearance on the show?
Oh my gosh. I guess it's probably somewhere between 9 and 10 years ago.
Ironically enough, we had a hard time finding it as well. We found what was your second appearance, episode 55. It was on May 29th of 2012. But on that episode, you said it was your second appearance. And I don't know where your first was. Your first was somewhere before episode 55.
it was probably an emergency. Mark's like, Andrew, I can't make it. Can you cover for me? And I'm like, okay.
It probably was. It
probably happened. You weren't able to change the show notes.
Yes, it was so on the fly we were not able to change it. So it was somewhere between August of 2011 and May of 2012 you had your first appearance, Mr. Rock Lobster. So back then you were still just the main lobster. You were not even the Rock Lobster yet. You had not evolved into your current incarnation.
That's true. That was early days.
Yes, early days. Speaking of evolving, the show has evolved over time. New segments, lots of different guests, different hosts, and of course different firms supporting us along the way. We couldn't have really created the show without the folks from VolX. You know, this was just a little inkling, little idea floating around in my brain. We should do a show about vol until the VolX folks came and said, hey, we want to put resources behind it to actually make it a reality. So forever be indebted to them. Now, demand derivatives. We have, of course, back in the day when they were still Russell Investments, before they became part of the FTSE Empire, which is now, of course, sponsoring over there on TWIFO. But back when they were Russell Investments doing RVX, they were on board the program. Then we had the SIBO for a number of years, hence our introduction to the once and future Dr. VIX. And then, of course, Matrix Executions. And now, of course, our friends over there at MIAX. And speaking of our friends, I think it is time. The green room is overflowing. Let's get to our first of many special guests here on the program. VolViews 500.
Hello, everybody. My name is Robert Kraus. I'm the CEO of Demand Derivatives, and I have a special guest for you today.
Hi, everybody. This is Don Schlesinger, and together with Bob, we were the founders, of course, along with Mark Longo, of Volatility Views quite some time ago. So we're reminiscing a little bit today and trying to remember perhaps some of our favorite stories and incidents connected with the founding of this wonderful show that's now celebrating its 500th episode, and we're offering our congratulations.
Oh, yes. And I think we should start, Don, with like how it started, We ran into Mark. I mean, this was about the time that we first met Mark, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so we met Mark, and we heard he was doing this podcast, this radio show, and we were very interested. And it just so happened that he liked the concept of a volatility show, and we ran with it. Do you remember like how we started the format kind of thing?
I think we were down at the one of the industry shows in Boca, and Mark and I actually sat outside. I think it was close to the croquet courts or whatever it was, and fired up the computer and recorded the first episode. But I can remember that, Bob, you were very high on a format that would not have just me speaking all the time, because sooner or later people would get pretty bored of just hearing the same voice. So you were very high on inviting industry guests, and I have to say that it was a great idea, and it worked out extremely well, because almost every week, as much as we could possibly book ahead of time, we used to tape on Friday afternoons. We would invite some of the foremost authorities on volatility. Some were academics, some were practitioners. I can remember wonderful interviews with Robert Engel when we were trying to talk about volatility forecasting.
Oh, yeah. And Robert was a Nobel Prize winner.
So, you know, we didn't fool around. We went right to the very top, and we had Tom Sosno from Tasty Trade. We had Ewan Sinclair, who's written some fantastic books on volatility trading. So week after week, we really tried to keep things interesting, and had some wonderful give and take between the guests and me as we explored various topics, and kept the show going for, in my recollection, I think at least the first 100 episodes. So we took it through the first 100, and Mark ran with it for the next 400, which is quite amazing. And I think it's been a mainstay of Mark's network, and really has been a terrific show.
Yeah, and one thing that I was kind of adamant about was that we didn't dumb down the show. You know, I saw all of these, you know, Kramer was on, and you know, Susie Orman and all that, and they were talking down to people. If you ask me, at least that's the way I took it. And yes, I mean, you want to try to speak of your concepts simply, of course, right? You want people to understand and kind of bring you up, you know, but we never really talked down to people. We talked at a very high level. And I remember one comment where the guy said, you know, I really don't understand what you guys are talking about, but I'm really learning a lot. So I love that comment, and it just goes to show, you know, that we kind of hit the mark, I think, because we also made it into the top 20 of iTunes at one point while you were on there, Don. And that was right up there with Susie Orman and, you know, and Jim Cramer and all those other financial shows. So it was really successful at the time. I do remember you had like a mantra and it seemed like every show or every other show, you know, you would talk about selling options. What was that again?
So I got teased a lot for saying, because I really felt that options were meant to be sold, and so I used to have a saying that there are really only two good things you ought to do with options: either sell them or don't sell them. But I wasn't too high on ever buying time premium. I kind of thought options were always systematically marked up a little bit, with implied volatilities normally higher than the realized that the underlying would go on to display. So we had lots of lively discussions about that, and different ways of trying to capture time premium and selling options. But I took a little teasing along the way, and that was fine. But the main thing was to explore, you know, what perhaps was a less popular way of trading options, and let the public know that at least there were two sides to every trade, and sometimes, at least in my opinion, the side that was destined to make the money was from the short side.
Yeah, and a little bit about us. I remember, so we were a startup, and we were trying to get this new exchange going to trade volatility. And since then, we've added other instrument designs, an option design and a global equity index design and a limited risk futures design, right? And we still keep plugging away to try to get our exchange launched. It's been a long time, but we're still here. We're still fighting for the concepts, and we think that it would be a real advancement for the industry if we could get going. And we keep doing so, and we're so grateful for Mark and all of our supporters back when we were very young and naive. And I hope to come back one day and either start another show or continue Volatility Views into the future.
Well, I echo your sentiments, and we'll wrap up by saying to Mark that yes, we were very grateful to have a forum. I hope everybody enjoyed the shows. Mark was gracious enough to invite us back several times over the years, even when we stopped doing it as a regular show. I've always enjoyed my time on the show as a guest, talking not only about the industry and volatility, but of late even a couple of shows on blackjack and card counting. The listeners seem to be interested. So once again, congratulations on this landmark 500th episode. We have nothing but admiration for what followed, but we're also very proud to have been the originators of the show and to have done those first 100.
Yeah, and congratulations to you, Mark, for doing. I think you did every show, right? 500 of them. So you're that was great, and I echo Don's sentiment, and I can't wait to see the next 500.
All right, our first of many green room guests, many folks generous enough to send some well wishes. Got to start with those guys, though. The show literally wouldn't exist without the boys from VolX. As we keep on rolling, time right on into our 500th Volatility Review.
It's time to break down the latest developments in the volatility trading world. It's time for the Volatility Review.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Vol Review, the portion of the show where we do what we have done for the last 500 episodes. Crazy to say that out loud, listeners. Yes, break down the week that was, and indeed still is, of all trading and trending and analysis and unusual activity, all sorts of fun perspectives. And coming into the start of this episode 500, the markets are feeling pretty celebratory today as well. S&P up a full 1.5%. The Dow up about 1.2%. NASDAQ up over 2%, saying, hold my beer, kids, up 2.1%. So we're back north, listeners. We are back north in the S&P of that 4,000 level. We were well below not too long ago, now north of 4,000, north of 4,060, actually. So feeling our gusto, feeling our oats out there today. It means all of our vol friends a little bit lower than they were this time last week, way back in episode 499. Spikes come into showtime, 23.15, down a little over 1.5 points, about 1.6 points. VIX cash was a little bit shy of 23, about 22.80, down about 1.5 points from where it was last week. VVIX, the vol of vol, at about an 84, down 3 points. And another measure of vol, the Viking, a.k.a. V-Spikes, at 104.5. That's actually unchanged from where it was this time last week. So a lot to unpack. Let's go around the horn. Let's start with the rockingest of lobsters, as he was known back in the early days of the show, the Maine Lobster. Mr. Maine Lobster, sir, what is catching your eye on this 500 episode spectacular volatility, sir?
I guess the biggest thing besides VIX down is the relative level of VVIX, and I'm sure Russell will be able to chirp in with an awesome statistic on that. But there was a time when VIX was 22 or almost 23 when vol would be a little higher, and it is not the case. VVIX is 84, so. Of course, I'm always interested to hear Russell's thoughts on that, but I just, in my mind, it's like a malaise of vol, where, okay, the market just goes up and down 1%, VIX stays in the high 20s forever until it doesn't. And nobody wants to buy any VIX juice, although, with a higher at the money, all the vol's higher anyway. But still, not a lot of vol for a volatile market. So I think that's, as of today, I think is kind of, that's what I'm noticing, just how like the October strangle, you could buy a 23 put and a 30-45 call spread for $2.30, maybe something like that, which for an October strangle in VIX just doesn't feel like very much to me with vol at 23, but maybe Russell has some thoughts on that. So in my head, I don't know. I don't think VIX is going to hold up in the next couple of weeks, but I could totally be wrong on that.
All right, Mr. Rhodes, you have been invoked now for the episode 500 spectacular. By the way, looks like the voice of Don resonating with our chat. Hawkeye 618, I haven't seen that name around in a while. Hawkeye, welcome back. He says, sell or sell not, there is no buy. Yes, the infamous words of the one and only Don Slett. Again, couldn't kick off the guests without those guys. Mr. Rhodes, sir, the 500th episode spectacular guest of honor. You must feel very proud, sir. You can put that on your tombstone. 500th episode guest of honor. What has been lighting up your tape in this mad week of volatility, sir?
It's so funny because I was just happening to update my CV, and that's right at the top.
It should be. Nothing can eclipse. I hate to say this, but you have now peaked.
History, and also the the originator of Russell's weekly rundown. That's also right up there at the top.
That should be number 2, 1 and 2. Yes.
Yeah, I think Andrew summed it up pretty well with respect to VVIX versus VIX, and nobody's looking for the juice in VIX calls, and that really is what I consider VVIX an indication of. In the first quarter or so, it was still elevated. It was elevated, and you had a lot of folks out there saying that the drop in the S&P 500, it's not going to be complete until we see that spike above 40 in VIX, which for reasons that would go on longer than this whole program, I think some market structure issues are in place that dampen VIX. And as call buyers continue to just kind of throw in the towel or look elsewhere to protect their portfolio, we suddenly saw a readjustment of VVIX this summer from triple digits to the 80s. And it's you keep trying. If you're worried about a tail event that didn't come, or even when we got a nice sell-off, if trying to use VIX to hedge your portfolio didn't work, you're not going to do it again. And I think that's the story behind the number for VVIX.
The story indeed. Oh, I hear some more noise coming out of the green room. They're already devouring our hors d'oeuvres. You might have to send a producer in with another tray of food. Those folks are chowing down here. Let's see who's joining us next on our special guest cameo list.
What's up, Volatility Views? Hey, it's John Smolin from MIAX. Congrats on the 500th episode of Volatility Views. That is something. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and your team and the people you work with, your guests, about everything market volatility related and everything related to Spikes Vol and Spikes Vol products. Looking forward to collaborating more in the future and talking all things vol. Congrats again, Mr. 500. The Ernie Banks of volatility. Go. Be well.
I've had many nicknames over the years. Never been called the Ernie Banks of volatility before. Of course, John Smolin, Mr. Floor Trader back in the day over there at SIBO, and now, of course, hanging out over there at MIAX. Thank you for those Ernie Banks of volatility. Mr. Meatball, a.k.a. the Barry Bonds. The guy got busted for steroids of volatility, sir. What's lighting up your tape out there this week, sir?
Yeah, I think, one of the reasons why vol is so muted is the ratio put to calls right now is at historic levels. And so when we start to rally, market makers have to cover, and that means they're buying stocks because they're short those puts. I would say that we saw a pretty good VIX drubbing this week, but the future stayed right on top of it. And now today, I got to say, vol feels a touch firm relative to the other days where VIX has been trading. So that is what I'm seeing right now.
You like that? You like being the volatility Barry Bonds? Just a few steroid indictments. That's all, right?
Just a few. But yeah, this market just does not want to drop. And I think part of it is, as Russell alluded to, is structural from everyone being so hedged. And then, it forces the market makers to do a little bit of a short squeeze. And that is what is driving things.
All right. We know what does want to drop, at least for right now, is the VIX futures term structure. Well, let's get on out there right now. That front portion of that term structure looking a little bit lighter than it was this time last week. Not a ton. Still frothy, but a little bit lighter. It was down about 0.5 point when we commenced operations here. The October future down about 1/3 point. Mr. Rhodes, sir, anything catching your eye out there in the volatility surface this week, sir?
No, you kind of beat me to that one. It's a little surprise. I'm surprised at how tight the September future is relative to the index. I think it was less than a point last I checked. I was kind of surprised at that. And keep in mind, I this time last week I was in Australia, so I'm still adjusting back to paying attention to the U.S. markets and sleep and everything else. But I didn't right off the top of my head know when September settlement would be. Looking at the September contract, the future versus the index, you would automatically, just looking at the two numbers, think that it's next week, but it's not. It's in 2 weeks.
You would indeed. Look at you, back to your globe-trotting ways. Straight off COVID, right back to the international travel, sir. No rest for the wicked out there. Mr. Meatball, Mr. Maine Lobster, at least this episode at least. Anything catching either of your eyes in the vol surface, gentlemen?
Yeah, I mean, it like Russell said, that September future remains right on top of it, and then the back end remains sky high, ridiculously expensive. They are not giving up the back end of the curve at all.
Well, ridiculously high and expensive might account for some of the trading we're seeing out there in SPKEX options land right now as you get on out to the vol products listeners or the vol options. Remember I said earlier, one of my favorite trades I've seen in a while was that ridiculous deep in the money put spread we saw go up in SPKEX just a few weeks ago. Well, it is no longer alone, listeners. Let's break down the top 10 positions in SPKEX options right now. I'll give you a sense of what I'm talking about here. Number 10, we have the relatively normal SEP 21 puts. Then we kind of have like the polar opposite of what we're seeing. We see a lot of crazy upside VIX calls. I present to you crazy in the money SPKEX puts. Number 9, the NOV 160 puts. Number 8, the OC 170 puts. Number 7, the OC 140 puts. Number 6, the September 180 puts. Number 5, the SEP 170 puts. Number 4, the SEP 160 puts. Number 3, the comparatively reasonable SEP 110 puts. Then we get the normal SEP 12.5 calls, and number 1 is the SEP 28s. So yes, even during our last show last week, someone was trading the SEP 110 puts for $83.90, lifting the offer. A surprisingly tight market, only 20 cents wide. It's pretty tight for what is essentially, a market on the underlying at that point. And the day before, we saw the 170 puts also going up for $144.20. Again, lifting the offer on another pretty tight market out here. So I don't know, Mr. Rhodes, you haven't been on since we've been talking about these, shall we say, intriguing prints. We're seeing spreads and we're seeing just straight up outrights now. Folks just lifting offers on these, shall we say, extremely in the money puts. Have you ever seen its like in the time you've been watching volatility, sir?
I have never seen its like in the time that I've been following volatility, sir. You got me digging while you're talking. You remember the show Big with Tom Hanks, and I know Tom Hanks is going to weigh in congratulations.
Yes, he'll be one of our cameos in a little bit. Yes,
yeah. But he starts to become a professional. He introduces a toy, and some jerky guy keeps going, "I don't get it." Well, that's what you're going to get out of me on this one.
What we will get, though, is our next guest from the green room.
Hey, Gene and Mark. Congratulations on 500 volatility views out there. I've been on a few and actually have a VIX guess bullseye, so I'm very proud of that. And thanks for getting us to produce these ORATS earnings reports and trades and featuring it on the show. It's been great to have that. Impressive, the quality of the comments and just the listener feedback over the years. So keep it up, and cheers to another 500.
Everybody's already racing to episode 1000, of course. Mr. Oracle, New Hampshire himself, a.k.a. Mr. Matt from ORATS. I'd forgot another legacy of the Vol Views show. Along the way, I kept saying, a lot of people keep asking us about earnings volatility and earnings data. There should be some data about this, and it should be freely available. And lo and behold, the earnings reports were born. Just for you folks, listeners, because we like you. You guys have been getting free, literally the best earnings vol data you can get. Prior to that, there was just, I think, one Goldman study from like a decade ago. So maybe if you pay for some big research house, they'll do it for you. But this stuff is out there for you, available completely for free. It's the best data you can get on this stuff because we like you folks listening to Vol Views and because I twisted Matt's arm into doing it. So you're welcome, Vol Views listeners out there. Let's get on out to the land of VIX options. Seeing a little bit more paper on the tape today, which is good because the rest of the week has been, shall we say, kind of anemic. 317,000 contracts on the tape today. The ADV is threatening 400 again. It's 401 right now, down 13,000 this week. So we are threatening to dip below the 400K mark in the wrong direction. Let's break down a top 10, what the quote-unquote size positions are in VIX right now. Then we'll get to some of the paper from this week, such as it was. By the way, the top 10 in VIX right now, hanging out, only two puts to be found in the top 10. So it's pretty much still all calls all the time, except for number 10, 142,000 of the SEP 22 puts for number 10. Number 9, $1.45 of the SEP 75 calls. Here we go, back to our fun calls, listeners. Number 8, $1.52 of the SEP 30s. Number 7, $1.59 of the NOV 80s. Number 6, 160,000 of the SEP 50s. Number 5, 184,000 of the OC 50s. Number 4, our second and final put in our top 10, 185,000 of the OC 20 puts. Numero Trey here. We got 200,000 pretty much exactly of the March 75s. Number 2, 205,000 of the OC 75s. And number 1 with a decent sized bullet, 230,000 of the NOV 70s. If I had to encapsulate this year of volatility with a theme, it would be upside. That's pretty much what we've been talking about for almost the entirety of the year, at least when it comes to VIX options. Mr. Meatball or Mr. Maine Lobster, hard for me to say, Mr. Maine Lobster. Any activity out there this week catching your eye in the land of VIX options, gentlemen?
I would just say a little bit. There's been a little bit more put activity in VIX. Like they sprung back to life and VIX can go down again. So, I think that September contract is getting kind of interesting, although the Fed looms kind of large on the 21st and you got CPI and all that. But a little bit of action on the like 25s, 24s, 23s, stuff like that. So,
yeah, you got some pretty decent action in November and January today. We got a November 25 put buyer, and somebody bought 20,000 of the Jan 23 puts for $1.65. October 30-40 call spread buyer out there for some size today. We saw buyers of way out of the money calls, shocker, in the back end throughout the week, buying the 80s and the 100s in December and March. So still our aspirational traders are out there. But to Andrew's point, yes, we are seeing an uptick in put buying. But D-City calls, 5,000 trade, 39 cents. We got a buyer there. They just can't stop themselves.
You know what else can't stop themselves from bursting out of the green room? It's our special guest. Let's see who's on the docket next.
Dear Mark and Gene, congratulations on achieving an amazing milestone of 500 episodes of Volatility Views. Without question, Volatility Views is the preeminent channel for relevant options and volatility-related content. The show has become an industry benchmark for anyone who is serious about keeping up to date with volatility as an asset class. The curation of relevant content alongside weekly conversations with respected experts in volatility trading brings insight that can't be matched elsewhere. Congratulations on this storied milestone, and we look forward to the next 500 episodes. Well done to the Volatility Views team.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Simon Ho, the Spikes father himself, the creator of Spikes, without which we wouldn't have much to talk about here on the show. I remember the first time I heard about Spikes, it was the folks at Bats were pitching it to me back at FIA Boca, way back in the day when they were looking for their own VIX competitor. Then they became part of the SIBO empire. Funny how that works. And Spikes went on to live and prosper over there in the land of MIAX. Let's see what was prospering this week here from a VIX options perspective. Really quickly, like we said, today, 317,000 contracts on the tape. So today looking like it's going to be pretty much the best day of a pretty quiet, truncated holiday week. Remember, we were closed for the Labor Day holiday here in the U.S. on Monday, listeners. The big dog today, as the Meatball alluded to, looks like an OCK 30-40 call spread going up about 26,000 times. Number 3, we have 20,000 of the Jan 23 puts. Number 4, 10,000 of the Nov 25 puts. And rounding out the top 5 today, 9,300 of the SEP 45 calls, an intriguing strike. Yesterday, the most active day of the week, at least so far. It seems like today is probably going to eclipse it soon, though. 341,000 contracts on the tape yesterday. 34,000 for number 1 of the Dees 80s. There's the VIX paper we know and love. Dees 80s, 34,000 of those. Followed by 17,000 of the SEP 25 puts. Number 3, 13,000 of the SEP 30s. Number 4, 12,000 of the SEP 22 puts. And rounding out the top 5 yesterday, 11,000 of the SEP 24 puts. Wednesday, 321,000 contracts on the tape. It's kind of been the level we've been hanging out for most of the week, it seems like. The big dog on Wednesday, SEP 30, 17,000 of those, followed by 16,000 of the SEP 23 puts. 13,000 for number 3 of the SEP 28 calls. Number 4, 13,000 as well of the Dees 35 calls. And rounding out the top 5 on a light Wednesday, 11,000 of the OCK 35s. Then out to Tuesday, was, of course, the start of our week. Pretty light, should say, start to the week. 293,000 contracts on the tape, 16,000 for number 1 of the SEP 75s, followed by number 2, 14,000 of the OCK 50s, 13,000 of the SEP 23 puts, number 4, 9,000 of the SEP 22 puts, and rounding out the top 5, 8,500 of the OCK 23 puts. And before we roll out of the VIX options paper, listeners, it wouldn't be episode 500 with our special guest if he didn't get to do his thing. So without further ado, allow me to present Russell's Weekly Rundown.
Now, Russell's Weekly Rundown.
I really just want to hear that drop.
I know.
That's the best part.
I'm going to, when my oldest crosses the stage getting her high school diploma, because she says she doesn't want to be associated with that, I'm going to blare it on my phone.
You should. I take it back. That should be the top of your CV. You have your own theme song on the network.
I have my own theme song. All right. Well, there are a handful of weekly type trades. I do have one for Monday. How about that? At 8:30 p.m.
I was going to say Monday.
You need I know, but they're open. So that, and I'll tell you, part of my Asia tour, a lot of people are looking at trade. A lot of people over in Asia think that VIX and SPKX and S&P options on futures, they're going to be more liquid than any option market during Asian hours within a year or two. That everybody is trading these things now that they're 24/5. But on what I'm supposed to be talking about. At 8:30 p.m., VIX After Dark, somebody sold a little over 100 of the September 14th 25 puts for $1.05. Not looking too good on that right now. On Tuesday during regular time, this is kind of the equivalent of selling the 80 or the 90 calls, but doing it with an option that expires in about 10 days or 9 days. Heck, 8 trading days. Somebody sold some of the September 14th 47.5 calls for 8 cents. A nice risk reward there if we get a volatility event in the next week and a half. Somebody also sold the 29.30 call spread. Took in a whopping, and these were the September 14th options as well, took in a whopping 11 cents on that. As long as we don't see the 30s, I guess as long as we don't see 29 plus, they're okay on that. On Thursday, This one looks pretty smart. Somebody sold 999. You think they do that because they believe that people scan for 1,000+ trades? The September 28th, 24 calls for 216. And then going out to the October 12th weeklies, today somebody bought the 28 37.5 call spread and paid $1.10 for that. They paid $1.74 for the 28 calls and sold the 37.5 calls for 64 cents. Looking for a way to play a volatility spike between now and, the week before standard October expiration.
I like that. VIX After Dark. That could be a name of a new segment.
You like that?
I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Sling in your VIX option
There's
after
just
dark.
nobody that's cool enough or smooth enough on your program to pull it off.
VIX After Dark. Get a little bit of
Yeah,
the old,
see?
the old Barry
Even when
White
we
going.
try, we just don't sound good.
The old Barry White going. I kind of like it. Let's see. Speaking of sounding good, let's see who's sounding good coming at us from our green room next.
Hey, Mark. Matt McFarland here from MIAX. Congrats on the 500th episode of Volatility Views. It's an awesome show, and I've really enjoyed being a part of it and educating your audience about spikes, futures, and options. It's a great place for the people to come together and keep a pulse on the vol market. Looking forward to 500 more. Thanks, Mark.
Everyone's getting me off to vol views 1,000. Just getting 500 under my belt. But thank you, of course, Mr. Matz, the keeper of all the futures over there in the land of MIAX. If you like those markets tightening up, you can thank him out there. Speaking of tightening up, let's see if things are tightening up out there in the land of our vol ETPs. We got SPKX and Spiky doing their thing, slowly growing their ADV out there. Still waiting. They said in a couple of weeks, so hopefully we'll have the options soon, listeners. I know a lot of you are waiting for the options. I'd like to know. I'm curious. Hit us up. Put it in the chat if you're listening live. Email after the fact. Have you traded the old SPKX or Spiky? We need a better name for SPKX. I just don't know what it is. Spiky at least rolls off the tongue. Of course, the 1.5 and the kind of the plain vanilla, non-levered ETPs out there for spikes. But intriguing stuff. Their ADV has been growing. On the underlying side, looking forward to seeing some options out there. Can't say the same for SVIX. SVIX not really doing a lot of paper these days, listeners. The SVIX is at about a 1320 when we kicked off the show, up about 0.8 of a point. Obviously, the inverse product, so it's going to look a little bit better on a day like today. Not doing a lot of paper, though. It was not even 250 contracts on the tape when we kicked off the show. Then the ADV has fallen in the wrong direction. It's down to 584. So we're going to roll on right past good old SVIX because it seems like the rest of the market is as well. And head on out to UVIX. When we kicked off the show, it was about a 910, still about a 910. That puts it down almost 1.5 points, about 1.4 points on the week. Doing some paper today, about 3,500 contracts on the tape right now. The ADV is also moving in the right direction, up to 6,500. It's up another 500 this week. The top positions out there, let's just do a top three really quickly. Number one, we got the SEP 10 puts, 3,400 of those, followed by the SEP 8 puts for number two, 3,200. And number three, the SEP 12 calls, 2,880. Those are your top three positions out there. Mr. Rock Lobster, anything catching your eye out there this week in any of our favorite vol ETPs, sir?
Besides the fact that UVXY is now, why don't they just split it? That's my problem with the ETPs right now is they're just at just generally crappy, untradeable, like teen prices. That's I guess that's my biggest problem with them. They're in the unfun area to trade. They're like $9, $10. Just not a whole lot of fun to trade. So I would like to be more excited about it. I really would, but I'm having a hard time getting excited about them currently at their snivelly little teeny price.
Mr. Once and Future Dr. Bix, have you been slinging any of these ETP friends, sir? And what do you think of our newest additions, Spiky and SPKX?
I haven't traded Spiky or SPKX yet, but I've added them to the work that I do on the weekends. SVIX I've been trading since the very beginning because I'm and I talked about it, I think, last time I was on here. Remember, I was talking about the stock repair trade, which I think is a scam
yes.
for stocks. But I like doing. I used to do it for SVXY, which I walked away from when they cut it down to I can't even say half margin. I don't know, half the strategy or whatever. But short volatility is a good long-term strategy. So, holding some, trading around a little bit, selling calls periodically. You skip through the trades, but somebody did a trade in SVIX options that I found kind of interesting today. It looks like somebody bought 100 in 520 lots, about 520 lots. Bought 100 of the September 16th, next Friday, 12 calls, and they paid $1.35 for them when the fund was at 13.27. So they only had 8 cents of time value in there. And if we have a sluggish volatility week next week, they may do kind of good on those options. And if it just kind of grinds higher, like would be expected. If we get one volatility spike between now and next Friday, they're going to regret that trade. Bye.
I already regret sending so many hors d'oeuvres to the green room because here come more guests.
Hello there. This is Jim Carroll, also known as the VIXologist. It has been brought to my attention that Volatility Views has reached the epic threshold of 500 episodes. I like to think of myself as a VolViews 1%er, having been a guest on no fewer than 5 of those shows. For those of us obsessed by all things related to volatility and securities markets, Mark Longo is our spiritual leader and a source of weekly inspiration, along with his regular sidekicks, Mark Sebastian and Andrew Giovinazzi. And let's not forget the show's producer, Gene Crotty, who keeps Longo's train on the track. Congratulations to the whole team for achieving this fantastic milestone.
Ooh, spiritual leader. I kind of like that. And the smart ones butter up the producer because they know she's the one who runs things behind the scenes. If you want to come back on the show, you butter her up. So the smart folks are doing. Looks, we got more guests coming from the green room listeners.
Hey, Mark, Tom Jark here. Just want to give you a quick shout out to your 500th episode, to you and all your Volatility Views listeners. That's pretty impressive. You have quite the extensive library of volatility content that's accessible. It's pretty unique. Just wish you a lot of luck and success in the future, and look forward to being on more of your shows on the Friday afternoons and talking spikes, volatility index, indexy shares, and VSPKES, of course.
All right, Mr. Tom, thank you for that. We are coming up against it, listeners, on this 500th episode. Spectacular. A lot to cram in here, but we couldn't do the 500th episode without, of course, embarrassing ourselves properly in the crystal ball. So let's get to it.
It's time to peer into the future and reveal what the volatility gods hold in store. It's time to look into the crystal ball.
All right, buddy, welcome to the crystal ball. And, I was feeling a little bit more vol, and I was looking pretty good until I wasn't. Mr. Meatball was doing his palindromic fade as usual. And let's see, coming in the end of the show, by the way, listeners, VIX right around 22.85, spikes at a 23.16. So you're not looking too bad on spikes, Mr. Meatball. You're about 0.16 away. You're 23.32. So you are ever so close, just outside. Oh, what a harsh mistress the crystal ball is. Just outside the 0.1 margin of victory. What do you say? I'm sure you take some umbrage at that, sir.
I mean, in this market, you got to say less 0.2 inside of 0.2 is pretty darn good. That's why I use these palindromes. They're my secret recipe for getting it right. So I'll go first. I'm going to say 22.22.
Oh, back to ducks there for Mr. Meatball. I will say that's pretty good, within 0.2 of a point. Not bad. Certainly better than I was this week. I'll give it to you. Mr. Maine Lobster. You didn't get to guess last week, so what are you feeling for this time next week? Yeah, you get a rare guess on the same episode as the Meatball.
Yes, I'm of his mind of it being lower. I'll do the ducks. I'll go 21.22.
You guys are just...
Well, no, it's 21.12 then, Andrew. It's got to be palindromic.
Oh, palindromic? Okay, 21.12? All right, yeah. All right. I'll go palindromic. I got it now.
Also
21.12.
21.12. Also our favorite Rush album, so it works in several different capacities. Out there to Mr. Rhodes, do you have a favorite Rush album? And then what is your guess for this week, sir?
I don't have a favorite Rush album, but it's funny. I'm guessing 2.20 and 2 cents.
There we go.
And actually, I was gonna go for 20. So, but just to keep the numerical theme going,
just to keep the fun alive. Speaking of the fun alive, we have one more guest who's chowing down on the hors d'oeuvres, wants to join us from the green room. So here he comes.
500 episodes of Volatility Views? Wow. Now that's an accomplishment. Congratulations, Longo. Doesn't seem like all that long ago when a bunch of old options traders were just talking shop. House, Matt, Longo, and myself. And now we're here. The thing about options is the asymmetry in power has always reminded me of nuclear power. It can be real dynamic, for the good and sometimes for the bad if you don't know what you're doing. Options are the same way. The most remarkable thing about Volatility Views, besides the fact that it's fun, is it educates folks on how options can properly be used to express an asymmetric view, hedge away portfolio risks, or reduce overall volatility. And I think that's quite a service to investors worldwide. So Longo, congratulations on 500, and I'll see you at 1,000.
All right, that was our buddy, Mr. Ash Vias, now from Resonance Capital out of there, Germany. Of course, you may know him by his pen name, his alter ego, A.K. Vias, the writer of such thrillers as Carnival Girls. Check it out. I just read that one. It's a fun one. Look for him on Amazon. That music, listeners, means we have come to the end of this 500th episode spectacular. While he was talking, I put down my guest for next week, 2465. So that is your vol market for the week, listeners. Let's go around the horn one final time for this 500th episode. Let's go out first to the rockingest of lobsters, Mr. Rock Lobster, sir. What is on your radar? What should folks reach out to you over there in the land of the pit horse, sir?
Radar, well, we have a CPI number, and on the 21st, the Fed, but I think the ECB has already kind of let the ball drop on that. So I think the market's expecting 75 basis points, and they're talking it up, and they don't care. So I think that's on the radar, and I actually, to be honest, expect more of the same next week that we had this week. As far as option pick goes, 888-TRADE-01. Call Ted or Andrew, other Andrew, and check out my Spy Master product. Use VIX and Spy at the same time. It is loads of fun. 888-TRADE-01.
Loads of fun. If you want more Rock Lobster in your life, and you know what? It's a celebratory day, so I'm going to keep the party rolling. The party doesn't end at the end of Volatility Views 500, listeners. No. I will keep everything open. Everything will be open so you all, everyone and sundry, can enjoy options oddities today. So if you want a taste of what myself and the Rock Lobster and all of our other special guests are putting down out there every week on options oddities, just stay tuned. If you're in the live chat now, hang out. We'll put some fun stuff in there. We'll be back in a little less than an hour for your live taste of options oddities. Good fun way to keep the party going. And Mr. RHOADS, sir, how are you keeping the party in the land of volatility going these days, sir?
Just doing what I'm doing. I got to spend some time with some APAC people last week. Got some interesting perspectives out of those folks. Have me back on soon. We can talk more about that because their attitude about things is different than they are over here. Also, inflation's a nightmare. You wouldn't believe how bad it is. $4 for a 12-ounce can of Coke in Sydney, Australia. So you think it's bad here? We don't. It's quite all right here. But finally, I'm sticking with my call. I think the low is in this time around for the S&P 500, etc. We don't need VIX over 40. I'm just going to keep saying that.
The low is in. There we go. You have called it.
Low was in a while back.
I would say the last time. Yes. Okay, there you go, listeners. Meanwhile, give him a follow on the old Twitters if you want more of his goodness in between 500th episode spectaculars. Over there, Russell Rhoads, 2 S's, 2 L's, and then Rhoads, RHOADS, all one word. And of course, you know where to go to learn more about all things spikes, MIAXoptions.com/spikes. If you haven't been there in a while, you should check it out. A lot of great free tools there, including what everyone loves, is always asking us for on our TWIFO show, which are the great free quick strike reports that we give you there. We give you guys so much free stuff. We love you. We give you the great free quick strike reports for futures options. So many of you have asked, can we get those for equity options? Lo and behold, the MIAX folks have done just that, adding to the rash of free data you get from VolViews. Now, MIAXoptions.com/spikes. You get the quick strike, and of course, you get shift search which is always free for you guys too. So we love you folks. All that journey begins. MIAXoptions.com/spikes. Of course, got to thank the folks at Spikes for keeping the vol party coming to you. We'll be back to you next week, listeners. For all of you on demand, that does conclude our broadcast week. Of course, if you're listening live, the part day continues. And we're back again next Monday for Option Block, all the way through to another Friday, another episode of Volatility Views. Stay safe out there, everybody.
Volatility Views is brought to you by MIAX, one of the fastest, most efficient trading platforms in the world. MIAX is proud to bring you Spikes Volatility products. Spikes options and futures are traded on the Spikes Volatility Index, SPIKE, offering pinpoint accuracy, radically faster dissemination, and a highly transparent settlement auction, all for ultra-low exchange fees. It's volatility reimagined. Learn more about Spikes at MIAXoptions.com/spikes. Options and futures involve risk and are not suitable for all investors. The statements made are provided for informational purposes only and should not be relied on for financial or legal advice. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.